And now, here come the bride and groom. Let's give them a big round of applause.
The MC announced our entrance, and we walked in. As we took our seats, the doors suddenly burst open, and a shadowy figure appeared. To everyone's shock, this person barged right into the venue.
Since I'm carrying his child, cancel the wedding, old hag.
I felt a shock run through me, realizing that the worst thing I'd feared was actually happening. So, you two are really going to ruin the reception and keep up this charade, right? I had a feeling it might come to this. Without missing a beat, I slipped out of my dress and, with a wide smile, said, "Thanks for taking this worthless guy off my hands. He's going to cost you $1 million.
What?
I'm Emily, a 35-year-old office worker. Recently, my engagement and marriage to my longtime boyfriend, Jake, from college, was officially confirmed, but I have some concerns. This feeling started a week ago at a celebration party held by Jake's company after they finished a big project.
Everyone, great job. Cheers.
So, I'll be joining these parties as the president's wife soon." As I was mulling this over and looking around at the happy faces, I noticed a young woman I didn't recognize sitting right next to Jake. I asked a colleague sitting nearby.
Her name's Sophie. She's 24 and just joined the team about 2 weeks ago.
"Oh, I see. Thanks for letting me know." I then quietly got up and moved over to sit beside Jake. "Oh, are you new here? Nice to meet you. I'm Emily, Jake's fiancée." I emphasized the word fiancée. But Sophie looked back at me, unfazed, and replied,
I've heard a lot about you from Jake. I'm Sophie. Nice to meet you. Jake's been such a big help to me.
Jake was grinning, clearly flattered. "Hey, Jake, can I have a bit of your time later? I want to discuss some wedding plans with you."
Actually, I'd love to get Jake's advice too. I've been struggling with some things at work lately, and I could really use his guidance. Would that be okay?
Sophie asked Jake with a hopeful look.
Well, if it's work-related, it can't be helped, right? Emily, I'm sorry. Let's talk about the wedding this weekend instead. Can I give Sophie a little priority today?
"Oh, sure, I understand. Work is important." I put on a friendly smile, pretending to be the understanding fiancé. 2 months after that company party, Jake's behavior had noticeably changed.
Hey, Emily, about the wedding. Do you think we could downsize it a bit? Or maybe just get the marriage license without holding a big reception?
"What? But my parents are really looking forward to the wedding."
I get that, but I still have those company debts. You know, I feel like if we spend on the wedding, people might say I should use that money to pay off my debts sooner.
That's disappointing.
And besides, small weddings are kind of in style lately, right? I mean, we're already 35. I'm sorry, but I don't see the point in having a big wedding.
When he brings up our age, I don't even know how to argue with that. With that thought, the conversation ended for the day. And after that, Jake continued to change. He claimed to be busy with work, and it reached the point where I barely saw him outside of wedding preparations, as if he didn't want to see me. Even when we were together, he seemed distant, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the new employee, Sophie, had something to do with his recent behavior. I need to think this through carefully. I kept worrying endlessly. Half a year passed, and finally, it was just before the wedding. Taking Jake's wishes into account, I had changed our plans to a much smaller, simpler ceremony. I would wear a wedding dress, but there'd be no costume changes or entertainment. We only invited close family and a few dear friends for a cozy dinner with good food. The simpler prep was helpful, but honestly, the thought of calling off the engagement had been crossing my mind lately, and I had been preparing myself for that possibility. Then came the wedding day.
Emily, you look so beautiful.
I'm so glad this day finally came. You've grown so much.
My dad said this with tears in his eyes.
Emily, I know it's been hard, but from now on, build a happy home with Jake.
Mom, don't get all dramatic. And no tears, please. The reception hasn't even started. Then the reception began, and everything proceeded smoothly. I was relieved that my worries had been for nothing, but that relief was short-lived. Finally, the moment I had feared became reality. I stood outside the doors to the reception hall, my heart pounding.
And now, here come the bride and groom. Let's give them a big round of applause.
With the MC's cheerful voice, the doors opened, the spotlight hit us, and applause filled the room. As the bride and groom, we were about to enter the hall and greet everyone who had come to celebrate. Suddenly, the doors opened, and a figure appeared. Everyone turned in surprise to see a person with wild eyes storming into the hall. In the shock of the moment, I couldn't fully process what was happening, but as the figure approached, it became clear that a woman had barged in. Breaking free from the staff who tried to stop her, she strode directly toward Jake and me. Still in stunned silence, I watched as she grabbed the MC's microphone and spoke directly to me.
Emily, I owe you an apology. The truth is, Jake and I have fallen in love. I knew Jake was engaged to you, so I tried to keep my distance, but he kept telling me I love you more than Emily. I'm going to leave her for you over and over. I should have waited for him to break things off with you before getting involved. But now that I'm carrying his child, you'll need to call off this wedding, old hag.
I was in a state of shock, realizing my worst fear had actually come true. Everyone in the room was frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Within moments, staff members rushed over, attempting to restrain her.
Don't touch my belly. There's a baby in there.
With her shouting this, everyone was thrown into confusion, unsure of how to handle the situation. Sophie, this is a wedding reception. Let's discuss this later. Jake, I'll speak with you afterward too. This isn't some part of the show, is it? It was clear from the staff's frantic response that this was no staged event. As murmurs filled the hall, my father picked up the microphone and said,
Jake, we're all here to celebrate the start of your marriage. I believe you owe us an explanation. Tell us clearly, are the things this woman just said true?
When my father finished, Jake, pale and shaking, was handed the microphone. Then, right in the middle of the reception, he began to apologize.
I can't marry you, Emily. What she said is true. I want to be the father of her child. So please, call off our engagement.
With that, he started to head toward Sophie. What, Jake, do you even realize what you're saying? I instinctively grabbed his arm to stop him, but without even looking at me, he pulled away and went toward Sophie.
Honestly, all I can say is I'm sorry. And, Emily, you like me, don't you? If you really want me to be happy, Can't you understand? I know it's selfish, but I don't think my feelings are going to change.
With Jake's words, I felt the entire room stir with murmurs. Then, boos erupted from both families and friends.
Are you kidding me?
What do you mean you want to be the father of her child?
Get a grip.
You cheating jerk. Do you even realize the nonsense you're saying?
Do you have any idea what a wedding reception is for? Apologize to Emily, you bastard.
I'm tempted to post this online. A public shaming seems fitting.
What a psychopath. Maybe he should take a seat in the electric chair.
The reception had turned into utter chaos, with guests either shouting angrily or storming out. So, you two are really going to ruin the reception to keep up this little circus, right? Well, I'll admit, I had an inkling this might happen. I actually noticed that Jake's feelings had drifted from me some time ago, so I've been mentally prepared for a while. I've been ready in case the wedding was called off at any time.
Thank you, Emily.
Jake exclaimed happily, completely ignoring the crowd's shouts as he stood beside Sophie, who looked equally pleased. I just didn't think you'd pull this on the day of the wedding. How long has it been going on with Sophie?
About 2 or 3 months.
Was it after that party?
At that time, I was just happy to feel needed. There were really no bad intentions. Please believe me.
You still made a move, so how could I possibly believe you? What do you plan to do about the reception now? Obviously, we'll have to cancel it. And since this is how things turned out, I'll be ending the engagement, too. You'll be covering the cancellation fees, Jake.
Of course, I'll pay for everything.
And to make it clear that none of this was my fault, I'll also be filing for damages.
Understood. I'm truly sorry.
Hearing Jake's response, I immediately stripped off my dress and said with a big smile, "Thanks for taking this worthless guy off my hands. He's going to cost you $1 million.
What?
Sophie looked shocked. Oh, did you not know, Sophie? Even as the other woman, you can be charged for damages. I grinned wickedly, seeing it a perfect opportunity. You stole my fiance, so of course, I'll be charging you. And considering all the trouble you've caused the guests here today, I'll be expecting a hefty compensation. Didn't you know that? Clearly, you have no common sense." Well, I guess only someone with no common sense would do something as foolish as going after someone else's fiance. I intentionally insulted Sophie and sneered at her mockingly. I figured a comment like that would wound her pride and provoke her to respond.
What did you just say?
Gotcha.
Fine. I'll pay the damages. After all, it'll be Jake who ends up paying. He's a wealthy company CEO, so covering damages for both of us will be no problem. Isn't that right?
Really?
That's right. So go ahead, demand damages. It won't bother us at all. Don't you know the going rate for these things? It's usually around $5,000, maybe up to $10,000. Did you think you'd be getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, like in some soap opera? That's fiction, you know. You haven't quit your job for marriage, and you're not pregnant. You've only been together for a little over 10 years, starting back in college, so that length of time isn't going to increase the settlement much. And since the engagement period wasn't very long, there's no reason for any major increase. In other words, Even if you inflate the damages, we'll have plenty of grounds to ask for a reduction. Based on experience, it's usually $5,000 from him and $5,000 from me, totaling around $10,000. I'll pay it all at once if that's what it takes.
Experience. So, Sophie, you've done this with other people's men before, haven't you?
Sophie, what are you saying?
Jake looked flustered at Sophie's sudden change. Jake, didn't you know? It must be a shock, right? Sophie, who's always acted like a proper lady, suddenly showing her true colors. But this is the real Sophie.
As for the cancellation fees for the reception, that would only amount to a drop in the bucket. I had Jake downgrade to a modest wedding plan in advance to keep the costs down just in case, so you don't stand a chance anymore.
With that, Sophie tilted her head and slipped back into her sweet, innocent act, the type men find so endearing.
You'll make sure to divorce him properly, won't you?
She declared smugly, as if she had already won. Hearing her, I smirked confidently and replied, "So, you think Jake can easily handle a $10,000 settlement? Well, sure, if it's just $10,000. But what about $1 million?
What, $1 million? Are you insane? Has the shock of having your wedding ruined driven you over the edge? And where are you getting that $1 million figure from?
Jake didn't tell you. That $1 million isn't just for canceling the engagement or the wedding. I'm claiming a legitimate return on an investment."
A return on investment? What are you talking about?
10 years ago, when Jake started his business, my parents invested $1 million for the building, equipment, and other operating costs. They own a significant share. They've received partial repayments with interest, but they had an agreement with Jake that once his company went public, the investment would convert to stock. That was the plan my parents and Jake had in place. If the company doesn't go public, there's no set repayment timeline, as it was assumed to be repaid eventually. But thanks to you, that's all off the table now.
What? Why?
That arrangement was based on Jake and me getting married. If there's no wedding, my parents have no reason to keep investing in his company.
What? Is that true?
The moment Jake heard my words, he started to panic. And for good reason. Although his business is doing well now, suddenly losing $1 million from the company's assets would quickly drain its funds. Of course, why should my parents keep funding him after he cheated on me and ruined the wedding? I already talked with my parents about the possibility of calling off the engagement once Jake started acting strangely. If the engagement is officially broken, they'll immediately notify him to pull out the investment and demand full repayment. Our lawyer is ready to make sure we get that $1 million back in full right away.
No. Please, I'll pay it back, but not all at once.
Dad, you know what to do.
You've got no right to make demands here. Jake, this is all on you. This is what happens when you ignore who's supporting you and act on impulse. You deserve no sympathy.
I'd love to forget this nightmare. I thought I could trust you, Jake, but look, Emily's wedding day is ruined.
To think you fell for such a scheming woman. With someone this short-sighted in charge, I don't see much future for the company anyway. I almost ended up stuck on a sinking ship myself. Out of options, Sophie stomped her feet in frustration.
No way. If that's the situation, I'm not getting married. I thought I'd have a nice life with a wealthy CEO. But if he has to pay $1 million, we'll be broke. Forget it. I don't need a man like this.
What? That's a problem because I don't want him either.
You're canceling the marriage. What about the baby?
I'm not pregnant. That was a lie. I figured if I said I was, you'd be so easy to manipulate, and you'd break things off with Emily.
What? You liar. So it was all a lie. Well, even if there was a baby, I was planning to get a DNA test to confirm it was mine if there was any doubt.
So, please, you're the one who didn't use protection, and now you're questioning if it's yours?
Don't get cocky just because you got with the CEO a few times. Honestly, you should be thanking me for even bothering with you.
Everyone was stunned by Jake's sudden outburst. Alright, you too. I'm just glad there's no pregnancy. It would have been sad to see you stuck with this sinking ship. By the way, Sophie, just because you're not marrying Jake doesn't mean you're off the hook for the damages I'm demanding.
That can't be.
Of course it is. As planned, I'll be seeking damages from the one who caused the engagement to break. What's the going rate? $5,000, $10,000. But maybe with a good lawyer, I could go for a higher amount. With that million back, I'll be able to afford a top lawyer and see just how much we can squeeze out. And since you're not marrying Jake, he doesn't need to cover your damages either, right? You can pay for it on your own.
No, I can't.
Then maybe don't mess with someone else's fiance in the first place. You made this mess, and if you can't handle the consequences, you shouldn't have gotten involved. Realizing there was no escape, Sophie finally broke down in tears right there. I looked down at her with a smile and said, "Hey, Sophie, thanks for taking this $1 million jerk off my hands.
Wait, please?
But you were a bit sloppy, weren't you, silly? Ladies and gentlemen, I deeply apologize for ruining this occasion. As you might have guessed, I found out about his infidelity today. Of course, I have no intention of forgiving him. Though it saddens me, knowing the truth means I have no desire to marry Jake. So here, I vow that this marriage will not take place. I apologize to everyone who took the time to be here today, only to witness this disgrace. We will, of course, return the wedding gifts you have kindly given us. For those who have finished dining, please feel free to depart at your convenience." I asked the staff to return everyone's gifts at the reception. Afterward, my parents, Jake's parents, Kevin and Catherine, and I personally apologized once more to the guests who had come to the reception, explaining that the gifts would be returned, and then we left the venue. As the weight of the situation settled in, an emptiness filled me, and I couldn't hold back my tears. I was heartbroken and frustrated, apologizing to my parents repeatedly, but they offered me comfort. A few hours later, we gathered our family members and others involved to discuss the situation going forward. My parents and Jake's parents seemed visibly upset, likely exhausted from apologizing to the guests. My family, along with our relatives, confronted Jake directly.
"Did you really think you'd get away with this? Think carefully about what you've done."
I only thought, if there was really a child with Sophie, I needed to take responsibility.
Have you lost your mind? A decent person doesn't have an affair while engaged. And what do you plan to do now? Don't think you'll walk away from this unscathed.
I thought I could somehow make it work. I didn't expect them to demand the investment back.
Your head's so empty it makes me want to cry.
We're done supporting you.
What?
At that moment, Jake's parents cut ties with him and had him sign a written statement.
We're truly sorry for what Jake has done, Emily.
Kevin and Catherine had been repeatedly apologizing to me, my family, and the guests since the reception.
This may be our last chance, so please, if there's anything you'd like to say, don't hold back.
Regaining my composure, I responded to Kevin's offer and said to Jake, as I said at the reception, we're proceeding with a claim to recover the investment, including the fees and damages caused by this incident. I'm demanding $30,000. I'm not reducing the amount, so prepare for that. If you contest this, we'll take it to court immediately. If you refuse to pay, I'll see to it that the collection of watches you treasure so much is seized. Kevin, Catherine, I'll count on your support.
Yes, you can rely on us.
We'll make sure he pays.
So, Jake, do we have your agreement? Jake was visibly shaken by the sight of me he had never seen before. Seeing him like that, I couldn't help but feel a bit of pity, realizing that in these 10 years, it was the first time I had ever shown him such anger. Since I'm usually calm, the pressure of me finally showing my anger seemed to scare him, so he reluctantly agreed. After that, I ended my engagement with Jake. My parents, who had been eagerly awaiting the green light, immediately contacted our lawyer to begin the process of withdrawing their investment from Jake's company. Facing an instant demand for the return of $1 million, Jake's company soon plunged into a financial crisis. Before long, they couldn't even cover operational costs, and the business quickly went bankrupt. I later heard from our lawyer that Jake is now burdened with leftover debt, living on the edge in a rundown apartment, doing manual labor every day. Apparently, the hardships of his new life became too much, and he ended up going back to his parents, begging for help. But this is where the severance agreement comes into play. Since he's legally bound not to reconcile, his return violated the agreement. It's nothing more than a child begging his parents for help. I responded to Kevin and Catherine in that way, and Kevin then spoke to Jake, who had shown up at their house again.
We already agreed to sever ties. We even signed an agreement. If you keep coming here, I'll call the police. This goes way beyond what we'd ever tolerate. I never want to see you again. Stay away from this house for good.
What? Dad?
I heard that Jake was turned away at the door. Even after signing the agreement, he tried to rely on his parents. Serves him right. Honestly, it felt satisfying to hear. Hearing that story, I have to admit I felt a bit of satisfaction, though I'll keep that to myself. But that feeling didn't last long, as soon after, he showed up at my workplace. He probably thought, since there was no agreement between us, and I was easier to convince than his parents, he'd have a chance with me.
Emily, I was wrong. I'm not seeing Sophie anymore. Please, let's get back together. Come back to me.
Really, Jake? Fu would want to reunite with a broke man, isolated from family and friends, drowning in debt, and without a job. Even if you were a woman, you wouldn't want that. Adults Fu can't see themselves objectively are just pitiful.
Is that how you treat someone you were engaged to? This is cruel. Where did all your love go?
Love, don't make me laugh. How can you even say that word after getting involved with a younger employee, abandoning me on our wedding day, and embarrassing me in front of all our friends at the reception? Do you seriously think you can talk about love after all that, and then to demand it from the very person you betrayed? I can't believe how insensitive you are. Just how shameless can you be? Despite everything I said, Jake still refused to back down.
Fine. Then at least lend me some money. I'm struggling to survive here and could starve. Please, help me.
I was already over him, so my answer was obvious from the start. Not a chance. Deal with the mess you made yourself, you idiot. Since then, he kept coming back, persistently asking to get back together. But with his frequent visits causing issues at my workplace, I explained the situation to management and had him banned from the premises, warning him, "If you bother me again, I'll report you to the police." After that, he stopped showing up altogether. Rumor has it that Jake is job hunting while drowning in debt. He seems to have quit the physical labor, juggling several part-time jobs to scrape by. Meanwhile, Jake's mistress, Sophie, also lost her job when the company went bankrupt. She broke up with Jake, and with my compensation claim, she ended up drowning in debt as well. I eventually heard that she had started working night shifts. Well, knowing Sophie, she's probably looking for a new victim among her customers, but too bad for her. Right now, Sophie's night job is at a factory, doing line work. Through our liar's office, she was referred to a factory managed by my father's brother, who made sure the staff knew she was a person to keep an eye on. She'll soon learn her usual tricks won't work there. This happened because they tried to deceive others. Hopefully, this will teach them both a lesson and they'll live a decent life from now on.